Well, Guatemala was one of 9 countries to vote against that UN General Assembly motion last week that basically called on the United States to not move its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in Israel. Of course, the controversy there over this decision is that East Jerusalem is considered occupied territory. It's considered Palestinian land occupied by Israel, and therefore countries, including the United States, have over the past few decades refused to move their embassies to Israel, refused in its essence to acknowledge that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Now, in terms of that decision in the UN General Assembly, you have 128 countries that voted to back the motion, which was brought by Turkey and Yemen. And so really that reflects the huge amount of support for, or opposition, to the decision by the United States, despite of the US ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley's words before that vote that they were going to be taking names as to who would be backing them and who would be opposing them, and yet they were still opposed by a number of US allies, including France and the UK in the EU, and many countries in the Middle East, some of their Middle Eastern allies, such as Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, for example, which is one of the biggest receivers of foreign aid from the United States. And that ties in with perhaps why some of these countries have decided to back the United States, because foreign aid is obviously very important for many countries, including Guatemala. Guatemala receives around $200 million US dollars in foreign aid in 2017, and so for them, because of that, and also because, for example, unlike many Latin American countries, they don't have a big Arab population, it was decided, at least in this instance, to back the United States and to decide to move their embassy in the future to Jerusalem.
Now, what's next? What can we expect? Which countries could do the same in the upcoming days or months?
Well, this depends really on what the United States decides to do with those countries that didn't back it in the UN General Assembly. If we go back again to Nikki Haley's words, will the names they took down, will they have any repercussions? Will countries like Egypt, like Afghanistan, like Iraq, which received hundreds of millions, if not over $1 billion in US aid, will they receive repercussions? Will that US aid be reduced? If it is, then we may see some countries decide to move their embassies to Jerusalem. But of course, you've got to remember that if we look at some of these countries that have backed the United States in the General Assembly, of course, some of them are very small, micronations in effect. You've got Micronesia, you've got Nauru, you've got Palau. Some of these countries don't actually have full embassies in Israel, in Tel Aviv, let alone in Jerusalem. So for countries that don't have any embassies there, we don't really expect any embassy to be moved or any new embassy to be established anytime soon. And then in terms of some of the bigger countries, I think if we look at the anger and the opposition to this decision by the United States in the region, across the Middle East, we saw protests across the region. We saw countries, like I say, really big US allies like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, who rarely go against the United States, who've been trying to get the United States on side in their battle against Iran, in this proxy war that's been going on in the Middle East, and yet they've still decided to not agree with this decision by the United States. And so for a number of reasons there, I think it's unlikely that we're going to see many countries move their embassies to Jerusalem. But amongst those 9 countries that did back the United States, there could be some moves over the next few months.